Hello and welcome to NDTV 24/7. I'm Priyanshi Sharma and it is the countdown to the income tax return filing deadline. The deadline is just 6 days away now. The deadline to file your income tax returns is July 31st and any delays will lead to penalties and interest liabilities if this deadline is missed. A local circuit survey recently on July 21st said that 54% individual income taxpayers are yet to file their return. There are still many questions, some of the questions that you all have sent us about the process, whether you need to file it, whether it's mandatory for you to file it, what are the changes this year, and a lot more. Now, to understand all of these questions and to really decode the changes in ITR this year, the process for you, and whether it's practical for you to file it in just these 6 days, we have with us experts joining us, Abhishek Ram, who is a fellow member at ICAI and he's also an author. So welcome to the show and thanks for joining us. My first question would be, who all are required to file an income tax return and what is the income threshold?
The income threshold for filing your returns is above 2.5 lakh. Though for individual and HUF, tax liability starts above 5 lakh. So that is a relief measure which has been provided to everyone. Also, if you hold any foreign assets, if you have credit card payments of the over and above certain amounts, if you have paid electricity bill of more than 1 lakh rupees, there are so many criteria. Ideally, one should file his return even if it is less than 2.5 lakh if he holds a PAN, or if there are certain transactions with respect to buying, selling of shares, or the sale of house property, capital gains are there.
Right. So, in fact, that was going to be my next question. A nil tax return for those below the threshold. Should that be filed? Even people with less than an income of 2.5 lakh, they should be filing a nil tax return. And if yes, then why?
Yes, they should file their returns because first they are holding their PAN cards, and there could be certain incomes which see, unless you file your return, you cannot claim deductions. So if the gross total income is more than 4 lakh rupees or more than 5 lakh rupees, and with deductions or exemptions, then your limit is coming below 2.5 lakh, then also ideally you should file your returns.
Right. And let's talk about the deadline now. It's just 6 days away. It's on July 31st. So what happens if somebody misses the deadline?
So there would be interest and penalties. Interest is 224B and C is already started. 224A comes if government doesn't extend the deadline, and which we are very hopeful that it should be done.
How high is the penalty that we're talking about? How higher up could it go?
Up till December 2022, if the deadline remains same, then it would be 5,000, and after that it would be 10,000. And for income below taxable limit, then it would be 1,000 rupees.
Right. So up to 10,000 is what the penalty could go up to. Now, another question is, who all are exempted from filing an income tax return, even if somebody's income is above 2.5 lakh? Are there some categories exempted from this year?
Yes.
Some senior citizens that don't have to file an ITR?
Yes. If they have only interest income and that TDS has been deducted, and also they have a higher threshold limits comparing to normal citizens, they have a higher threshold limits.
Right. Now, joining us on this discussion is also Mr. Anuj Goyal, who is the Central Council member at ICAI. So, welcome to the show. We've been discussing the basics of the income tax return filing. And one of the questions, right, when you see that platform is there are multiple forms. There are 7 forms. Which one does one need to fill, and which tax regime should they opt for? Should it be the old tax regime, the new tax regime? Take us through those choices and what really should guide any taxpayer's decision.
See, as far as the new tax regime is concerned, new tax regime is yet to come, and the salaried individuals with the annual income of up to rupees 50 lakhs have to file form number 1, and I think most of the employees are covered under this category. So I am quite confident that government will certainly see that how the last date of the income tax return filing can be enhanced from 31st of July. Because there were a lot of problems in this year, due to corona pandemic also and otherwise also. So I'm quite confident that government will certainly see that how the Silrite class particularly can get
so
the
are you saying
relief.
are you saying that there's a chance that the deadline could be extended, and till what time?
I am more than confident that up to 31st of August that deadline will be enhanced.
That is definitely good news for all those who might be missing this deadline because they've not been able to fill it by now. But of course, we'll see whether that officially comes from the government. But to get into the details of filing the income tax return, if it doesn't get delayed, and even if the deadline gets delayed, this is important. Mr. Abhishek Ram, if I can come back to you on the forms and on the tax regime. 7 forms. Could you please tell us which are the forms that somebody should fill out, and how are these different, and how should one decide which form is meant for them?
See, if you have only salary income, and then it is ITR 1. If you have certain other incomes, then it goes to ITR 2. ITR 4 starts for the business one, then goes to ITR 7. So these are for corporates, for companies who are going to file. So for individual, there are only 1, 2, 3, and 4. And if you have capital gains, then it would be ITR 3. If you have a proprietorship business, that would be ITR 4. So for July, the relevant forms are 1, 2, 3, 4 only.
Right. So only 1, 2, 3, 4 that are relevant for individuals, and for less than 50 lakhs of income, it's ITR Form 1. Now, also the 2 tax regimes, the old and the new tax regime. How should a taxpayer decide which tax regime they should opt for?
See, what we have seen, that if someone has deductions, then old tax regimes are better for them. If someone doesn't have any deductions, he has flat and he doesn't have any investment, then might be new tax regime could be better. But as Indians are more prone to investments, savings, then old tax regime is still better.
Right. So you should base your decision on how many deductions do you want.
But actually, every year we can check it again and again, which tax regime is giving us lesser tax liability, and we can choose that year itself.
Right. So right before choosing your tax regime, you should check which one is leading to the least tax for you. Now, another question, getting back to the deadline and getting back to what happens when you've missed it. But a question that we've been getting from a lot of our viewers is that what happens if you've missed filing your ITR for years, let's say for 5, 6 years, and you now want to start? I mean, for some people that must have suddenly woken up that they need to file their income tax returns. What can they do now? Mr. Anuj Goyal, if I can take that question to you.
See, there is no restriction of the filing of income tax return. As such, if you have not filed income tax return for 5, 6, 7 years, you can very well file now, but you can't file for the 6 years back return or 7 years back return.
Right.
Only for 2 years you can file the income tax return. And I am quite confident that the Silrite class can't miss the filing the return, because the tax has been deducted, advance tax has been paid. So only thing which they have to do, they have to file the return and to claim the refund, if any. So, but for the 6 years or 7 years or 5 years, one can't file the income tax return. But if one has missed filing the income tax returns for 5, 6, 7 years, they can very well file the income tax return of this year as well as of the last year. 2 years return can be filed.
Right. So if they can file the income tax return for this year and the last year, but what happens to the 5 years? You can't file an income tax return for that. So do you pay a penalty or any charge that you have to pay if you start filing your interest rate returns after, let's say, 5, 6 years?
See, it is not allowed to file the income tax return of 3 years back or 4 years back as such. But if some tax liability is there, of course, that tax liability is supposed to be paid along with interest and penalty. And for the late filing of the income tax return, Mr. Ram, I think we have to pay 5,000 rupees penalty if we have not filed the income tax return up to the due date, say up to 31st of July for this financial year.
Right. Yeah. So, Mr. Ram, if I can come back to you on that question. So, if we take a case of somebody who's not filed it for, let's say, 6 years, so you would say they should start filing it now for the last year at least and for this year. And the 4, 5 years they've not filed it for, that completely won't matter anymore. That won't be significant. Nothing will have to be paid for those 4 years that they can't file an ITR for now.
जब जागो तभी सवेरा. So if you are awake now, start filing your returns. Regarding your old returns, so this year we have got ITR U form, and a previous year return and current year return can be filed. Now coming back to the returns which are 4-5 years back.
Right.
So if you have a tax liability, you cannot file your return, but that doesn't stop government from recovering their due tax from you. So ideally, one should pay tax along with interest and penalty, make his return, and submit this letter to the department that this was my return, which I forgot to pay, and now I cannot file my return, but this is the tax which I am suo motu paying myself. Otherwise, that might invite a harsh penalty or stricter action by the department, which could be very harsh. I would not like to explain here what I mean to say very harsh. It would be very hard. So if you have avoided paying taxes to the government, and salaried class, as Anush sir has said, that salaried class would not be the category which would have missed their filing their return, because all taxes has been deducted from them, so there is no additional tax liability. So that should be the way. As a good citizen, you should file your return on time, pay proper taxes, and help in timely filing your returns along with paying advance taxes also.
Right. So even if you've missed filing the returns for the past few years, it's never too late, and you can still start filing it for the current year and the last year. Now, from this year, there's also a change. There's a 2-year window that will be given to update ITR details for any errors. Now, Mr. Anuj Goyal, if I can come to you on that question, how does this work, and are there any charges that somebody will have to pay to update their details or fix their errors?
I think it is a very, very welcome change. And when one is filing its income tax return, there are always chances of the errors, and there is no requirement of paying any additional tax, interest or penalty. One can very well revise the return, and that window will be open for 2 years. And this is a very, very welcome change, even if for the year ending 31st March 2021, if one has done some errors, still it can be changed, and accordingly the assessment can take place.
Right. So definitely good news for all taxpayers. If you make a mistake, you can correct it within 2 years without paying any penalty. Now, coming to the question about filing the income tax returns before time and before this deadline, if I can come to you, Mr. Abhishek Ram. I mean, there's no one answer to this question, but how much time really is needed to fill out that income tax return? And it's just 6 days to go to the deadline. Do you think if somebody starts today, is it realistic to still meet the deadline and complete all formalities?
Yes, I believe that whatever documents would be provided to a professional by 28th or maybe 29th morning, they would be able to complete all those documents. See, the thing is that now we have to match, or a taxpayer has to reconcile his data with many things.
Right.
One is Form 16. Then it is Form 16A, then there is Form 26AS, then AIS, then a summary TIS. So there's so much of the reconciliation is required. There are certain problems with AIS and TIS. For AIS, so the 31st May was the deadline to file TDS return, and the AIS was available, say by 15 or 16 June.
Right.
So everyone has got 45 days to file his return and reconcile this thing.
Right.
But till date, the problem is when you go to the AIS, it doesn't have March quarter or March GST returns data.
Right.
One thing is missing. Second, when we go to the tabs of capital gains, STF. So when we go for the purchase and sales part, the costing part. So if the shares were purchased 2 years back or maybe 3 years back, then the costing has certain issues with the tab. And in certain cases, cost is shown as 0. Now, with this kind of information, you need more time to reconcile each and everything. And above the top, we have bank statements due to Corona COVID. Everyone
Right.
was at home and doing much of the UPI transactions.
Right. So a lot of
But
information
that has
needs to
made
be
their bank statement
consolidated
from
for.
5 page to 50 page.
Right, so a lot of information that needs to be consolidated for this filing, but you still think that it can be filed well within time. But to end this discussion, we'll just take some questions that we got from our viewers on social media. One of them asked about deductions that taxpayers can claim, and one question is, can the expense be taken as medical expenditure in the case of a senior citizen if there's no insurance under ATD? Can medicine expenditure be taken as medical expenditure for this case? If I can take that question to you, Mr. Anuj Goyal.
No. As such, medical expenditure plainly incurred by any citizen, whether one is senior citizen or not, is not allowed. But of course, if one has paid for the mediclaim, etc., then this is allowable deduction. So
Right.
I think for each and every return filer, particularly the salaried employees, it is always advisable that one should go for
Right.
the mediclaim so that the insurance premium one is paying
Right.
can be taken care of in the income tax return filing.
Right. And my last question to you, Mr. Abhishek Ram, another question that we received. Should international students who are studying outside of India for the last year, are they required to file income tax returns in India?
Had they made some income? If they have made, and if they were in the
If
category
they've made an
of
income
the
in the country that they're living in.
that's what I'm saying. They had made income in foreign country, but if they were resident, they were covered in the income in the ordinary resident. Then they should file this income. But as they had left India because of the study purposes, they would be out of that purview, and this income which they have earned in other countries, that would not be there. But what I would suggest that they would be having some saving interest income, maybe through ATC, maybe through their saving bank account in India, that
Right.
should be shown while filing their returns in India. Also,
Right.
if they have taken any education loan, most of the student takes, so then they should start filing their returns so that when they will start repaying their loan later on, then they can claim interest deduction there itself.
Right. Thank you very much. Thanks, gentlemen, for joining us on that discussion and really decoding all the questions and answering all doubts in terms for filing income tax returns. So as our guest said, it's still not too late. You can still start and file your income tax returns in time. More than just being a responsible citizen, they're also needed as an income proof if you fall over the tax bracket of 2.5 lakh annually. It's needed as an income proof while you're applying for a credit card, while you're applying for a visa or any official document. So make sure you fill out that income tax return right before the deadline on July 31st.